the first piece of music that I ever learned as a child was the national anthem. You can take an Indian out of India, but you cannot take the Indianness out of an Indian. Whatever I feel strongly about, it's communicated through music. I had a severe form of dyslexia. So schooling was that basically everybody used to call me stupid. I do not like the way that movies portray children, especially when it comes to autism spectrum disorders. The Grammys always felt like an unattainable dream, and the notifications were like 5 or 6 a second. And then I went to my phone and looked at it and I kept seeing the word Grammy on. I think the best emotive response that an audience can have is through Indian classical music, because Indian classical music is based on feel, it's based on expression. That is what excited me so much about it. I can challenge you this. In your office or anywhere in the street, ask them to name one album of Pandit Ravi Shankar. Nobody will be able to name one. Every art form is all about breaking the rules, but you have to know the rules in order to break them. It is incorrect to say that a musician is not a good musician just because they've not had an education. I've always felt that the power of music should always be harnessed for good. Meeting with Prime Minister Modi pushed me in the right direction. I'm a very, very proud Hindu, but at the same time, I'm an atheist. Because atheism is very much within Hinduism. Everybody's aspiration when they become a musician is that I have to do a Bollywood film. If I tell people in India that I'm a composer, the first question they ask me is which film?
Mysore Pak is Tamilian or Kannadiga. What do you think?
It's definitely Kannadiga. It's Mysore Pak.
Namaste, Jai Hind. Thank you for watching or listening to ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. Thank you also for writing in and telling us who you would like on the show next. Now, do also watch Quick Take. We're doing this. It's a quick guide for topics of current affairs. For example, we've done one on conjunctivitis or eye flu, which is raging through the country these days. We've also done one on the Delhi bill. Should it be of interest to you if you don't live in Delhi or if you live abroad? Here's the link to where you can watch this show. On this podcast today, we have the youngest Indian Grammy winner. Ricky Kej is the 4th Indian to win the award. The world-renowned music composer and environmentalist that he is, it was quite natural that UNHCR would want him to be a Goodwill Ambassador. Ricky Kej is a 3-time Grammy winner and the youngest Indian to win a Grammy. So let's meet with the effervescent Ricky Kej to know more about the man behind the music. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast. Should I call you Dr. Kej, Dr. Ricky Kej?
Ricky is the best.
Okay, I have your permission. So before the viewers start trolling me on calling this eminent musician by the first name, I have his permission. So thank you so much for being. I'm most honored. Unfortunately, I can't have you performing live for me out here. That would have been fabulous.
Of course.
But thank you so much for being part of
Thank you
this
so much
podcast.
for having me. It's an honor.
All right. So let me begin by asking you first off that, this instrumental version of the Indian national anthem, we're going to play it afterwards. I just want to know what it was like to get all these fabulous artists together and in the Abbey Studios.
So I've actually worked with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra on a number of occasions in the past. In fact, my previous Grammy Award-winning album also featured them. I love that orchestra. They're absolutely brilliant. And about 3 months ago, that's when I came up with this idea that why not, record the Indian national anthem with the biggest, with a huge symphony orchestra. So I checked with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. They really wanted to be a part of this, and they said that let's do this together. So it was an amazing experience going to Abbey Road Studios and actually conducting the orchestra. And
to think that the Beatles played here and Pink Floyd was here.
So much of history in those walls.
From Kanye West to, Lady Gaga, I guess. I think she also played there, right?
Pretty much everybody, including Hans Zimmer, John Williams, Howard Shore. All the greatest movie soundtracks have been recorded over there. So there's a lot of music in those walls, and to actually leave your mark over there is very, very nice.
Before we play the national anthem, I just want to tell viewers that we have vada and chutney, very much Karnataka.
Yes.
And because Ricky Kej, though born to Marwadi and a Punjabi home, lives in Bengaluru. So, he has his Kannada roots.
Of
so
course.
we have the vada, and towards the end, we're going to have that Mysore Pak. So, Ricky, we're going to play the little bit of the national anthem, and you can eat your vada while that's happening. what I wanted to ask was that, you when you picked up the national anthem and when you decided to put your version, it's very true to what the original is, but there are moments which are like sheer magic, which like one could never think, oh, can the national anthem be improved upon? I won't use the word improved
Yeah.
upon, but you bring that extra.
New perspective.
Correct. So tell me about that. Why did you think of doing that?
So first of all, the national anthem is, like every Indian, it's a very, very important piece of music for me. In fact, it's even more important simply because the first piece of music that I ever learned as a child, as a really small child, was the national anthem before I learned any nursery rhymes or lullabies or anything like that.
Oh.
So it's something that is within my blood, and I've made numerous versions of the national anthem in the past, even before my professional career had started. After my professional career started, I created one version a few years ago which was dedicated to the natural world of India, dedicated to the forests and wildlife, because I wanted to showcase a perspective that the forests and wildlife are an as important part of our country as us human beings. And India is much more than just us human beings. Last year, I did another version of our national anthem where I got refugees who are living in India, who our government has, given them a new home. And they feel so welcome over here. They felt very grateful to our government. They felt very grateful to our country. And they decided that, we want to sing the national anthem. That's what we want to do to commemorate 75 years of Indian independence. So I do a lot of work with them through the United Nations, through my role as their Goodwill Ambassador. And I basically found 12 fantastic singer refugees, sang the national anthem with them, and that went completely viral last year.
Yeah.
And this year, I thought that why not give the national anthem the grandeur and the hugeness that the national anthem is all about. So as you mentioned, it's a beautifully composed piece of music by Rabindranath Tagore, a beautiful, beautiful piece of music. And so for me, it was all about decorating it and showing it a perspective that it absolutely deserves, or even more.
Yeah, I'm going to get to the part about your work for the environment, your work for the UN. I'm going to get to that part. But before that, what struck me is what you said about how National Anthem is the first song that, that was close to your heart, song or anthem or whatever you want to call it. You were born, so I'm going to go right back.
Yeah,
so
sure.
You were not born in India. You were
True.
born in the US. How come the Indian national anthem was so important for you even as a child?
So my father is a very patriotic Indian. So that's all I can say. He, even though he's from Churu in Rajasthan, he grew up in Myanmar. And he was in Myanmar in a Marwadi community. He lived over there, and he was there right up to his first year of medical college. And he was also in the RSS during that time. And an amazing person. He really, really loves our country to no end. And he maintains that discipline even now. Like, for example, when COVID hit, he's 80 years old. And for 2 years, he did not miss a single day of going to the hospital. There were days when he would see up to 100 patients a day.
He's a medical practitioner.
I forgot about that. I forgot to mention that completely. He's a doctor. So he would see patients every single day, sometimes even 100 patients, sometimes even more than 100 patients. So that's how much he's dedicated to our country. That's how much he's dedicated to our social service. And I guess some of that has rubbed off on me. So when we were growing up in America, I was there for just 6 years since the time I was born. And of course, when I was 6 years old, we moved to India. So he inculcated all of these Indian values in us and in my brother and me. And also, he ensured that, that the first piece of music that we learned was the Indian national anthem.
Okay. So there was the nationalism part of it and there was the music part of it that was part of the national anthem for you. So you moved to India really early in your life. Was that difficult because you were just 6 or 8 years old when, you new school, new friends? How important was music to blend in with India? Was Indianness something that was alien for you?
It wasn't actually alien for me. But I believe that, that you can take an Indian out of India, but you cannot take the Indianness out of an Indian. And that's the case of everybody, all my relatives, whoever have moved abroad or friends or musicians. It's just like, that an Indian, if you get an Indian to make a beautiful dish like a pasta or a lasagna or something like that, they'll probably make a dish which is comparable to any of the master chefs anywhere in the world. But just before it goes onto the table,
Put a little hot sauce.
there'll be a little bit of chili powder and turmeric powder thrown into it, It's the same with me. No matter how much I try to make music which is Western, or if I make an attempt that I'm going to make something that's completely Western, or I'm going to do something that's completely hip-hop or whatever, there will be some Indian garnishing or some Indian element put into it, because that's how I am, that's how I think.
Right. So tell me, when you tell, your parents must have been typically Indian, right? I mean, your dad is a doctor, so he'd obviously want you to join the medical profession. And at what stage did you think that, okay, music is the way I want to go? And I know that you went to a dental college.
Yes, I did.
So typical Indian parents, I think our viewers, even those expat Indians who are watching this, will empathize with this completely. Imagine a young kid telling his parents in India that music is going to be my career. And this is in the 80s or 90s, I think.
In the 90s, correct.
In the 90s. So tell me about that period in your life.
So as we all know, in 12th grade is when we have to make a strong decision as to what we want to do for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
So from my childhood, I knew very, very clearly I had no other ambitions, but I just wanted to become a musician. Mm-hmm. And my parents knew about that. But somehow in their head, they thought that music is still a hobby, it's not a profession. So when I articulated it to my parents in my 12th that I want to take up a career in music, they were furious. So they were like, okay, but what are you going to do? Like music is a hobby, but what are you going to do professionally? So after a lot of fighting with my parents, a lot of arguments, we reached a compromise that I would finish off a degree in dental surgery. And once I got that degree, then my parents would never question me again for the rest of my life. So that's what I did. I went to 5 years of college. In the evenings, I was doing music professionally. So my professional musical career had already started while I was doing my dentistry.
Okay.
And at the end of 5 years, I did not know anything about dentistry, but I got a degree.
Where did you studied in Bangalore?
I studied in Bangalore itself.
Okay.
And then, of
You're
course...
a Bishop Cotton's boy.
Yes.
So viewers, listeners, here's a Bishop Cotton's boy who's done his work. He's paid his dues, gone through dental college, and then become a musician.
So I had to keep my parents happy because
Right.
we cannot not listen to our parents.
Yeah.
So I gave the degree certificate the day I got it to my father, and I told him that this is for you. I think dentistry is a very noble profession and an important profession, but it's not for me. I want to be a musician. And then after that, instead of doing music in the evenings professionally, I was doing music the whole day.
Okay. So Ricky, who inspired you in the sense that, did somebody tell you, I'm sure somebody must have told you this, that if you want to do music, you've got to learn it. But you apparently are a self-taught initially musician. So tell me about that journey also.
So initially I was self-taught as a musician, and I was even then, I was quite successful in terms of, I was winning competitions, I was winning awards and stuff like that. But then when I got into dental college, that is when I decided that, okay, music is going to be my profession for sure. So let me sort of overcome a potential handicap that could happen in the future with me not having a music education. So that's when I took a music education in Western classical music and in Indian classical music, that is Hindustani classical music. So that, as I said, I could overcome that handicap that potentially could happen later on. Because if you have a music education, you know what people have done in the past, you know what are the rules. Because every art form is all about breaking the rules, but you have to know the rules in order to break them.
Okay.
And also it gives me a lot more confidence when I'm communicating with other musicians because I'm speaking the same language as them. So that is why I thought that the music education that I took was extremely beneficial, and I would encourage every musician to treat their profession with a lot of respect by taking up a music education.
Isn't there a little bit of snobbery also in that those who have not had that training are not given that kind of respect, even if they are fabulous musicians? Till, these talent shows came on air on television, till then, if a kid was to, kid in the sense if an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old would apply to, say, the Sangeet Natak Academy or want to perform in Music Academy in Chennai or, perform anywhere, the first question is that, where have you trained? How many degrees do you have in music? What kind of classical background? Isn't there a snobbery also in the world of music?
Probably there is. I've not faced that. I had not faced that even in the initial stages before I had a music education. But I guess there will always be snobbery because if somebody has gone through a degree, they will want other people also to go through it. So I guess that kind of ego will exist. But I would say that it is incorrect to say that a musician is not a good musician just because they have not had an education. There are some fantastic self-taught musicians in every genre of music everywhere in the world who are unparalleled when it comes to their music virtuosity and their knowledge. So I guess it's an art form. You can pick it up yourself. You can be taught. But I guess taking a music education, as I said, is in my opinion very important, so that everybody's speaking a common language, and plus the rules that have been set forth by our ancestors and and people before us, so it becomes easier for us to figure out what we have to do.
Also to respect the heritage, I guess, because nationalism, patriotism is so important for you. It's also a way of appreciating a kind of music, because classical music, unless you've grown up with it or have a ear for it, it's hard to understand the nuances. So I guess it's easier to appreciate the art form if you have learnt it also.
No, you brought up a very good point over there when it comes to music education itself, because I believe that music education itself should become compulsory in schools. And the reason for this is that not everybody has to become a musician.
Right.
Just like if you're learning physics, not everybody has to be a physicist. So not everybody has to be a musician. But I believe that a country is defined by her art, and a country is defined by how amazing the artists are, and art is a very good soft power, especially when it comes to music, when it comes to a country. So what happens is that if there is a basic music education in schools, then you are uplifting the art itself. Because me as a musician, I can make more complex art, I can make more beautiful art, because I know people will understand it, because they are sensitized to music. And I don't have to constantly think that, okay, I have to dumb down my music because people will not understand. So I believe that a music education will help tremendously in uplifting the art, and I think that is very important.
Okay, let me go back again to your childhood when you were talking about, that your professional journey was going on simultaneously with your dental studies. Like you were playing professional music. What were you doing? Because I know you were part of a band.
Yes.
So tell me about that. It's I guess every young kid's dream, right? To be part of a band in college years.
Absolutely.
Tell me about those years.
No, it is exactly like what you mentioned. I used to play the guitar, I used to play the keyboards. So I was part of multiple bands. One band in particular was a band called Angel Dust. We traveled the length and breadth of India, did concerts everywhere, won a whole lot of competitions. It's everybody's dream to, be a part of a band and, and have that attitude and stuff like that. And just like every other musician, I had an evolution of music in my head. Because while growing up, I was listening to a lot of rock music. Then it went into heavy metal music. And I thought that every other genre of music is terrible. Why aren't people listening to heavy metal music? And then later on, it went
I guess it's also the 90s, no? Jethro Tull nahi suna to kya jiya?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Or Metallica or whatever.
Metallica or whatever.
So you have to be wearing those black t-shirts, and
Yes.
you have to have the long hair and the attitude and all of that stuff. Then slowly, as I evolved in music, I listened to jazz music. Then, of course, I settled in on Indian classical music, both the Indian classical music forms, the North Indian and the South Indian forms. And then I realized that this is what I want to do.
Okay.
I want to have, I think the best emotive response that an audience can have is through Indian classical music, because Indian classical music is based on feel, it's based on expression, it's based on improvisation. And that is what excited me so much about it. And
you didn't experience a divide, Ricky, between Western and Indian classical, like friends, peer group saying, what, you're going to learn Hindustani, you're going to learn classical, Tala, Raga, you're going to be doing.
That was the case during those days. During those days, it was uncool to be an Indian classical musician because of the way the way the mindsets in the country was in big cities. But now I'm really thrilled that for the last few years, that's changing completely. There is a lot more pride in being Indian in India. And younger people, I've seen so many young people who I speak to in colleges and all of that stuff, when they talk about playing a musical instrument. Previously, the default was guitar,
Yeah.
that we have to have a guitar in our hostel room and we have to be playing rock music and all of that stuff. That is changing right now.
Okay.
The mindsets are changing, where people want to learn the bansuri, people want to learn the veena, people want to learn the sitar, they want to learn the tabla, because people are feeling a sense of pride of being Indian. And that is a new phenomenon that I'm seeing.
When did you figure out that, okay, these instruments I want to master, these instruments not really my favorite?
I guess also it depends upon my skill level. So I can play a whole lot of instruments. If somebody puts me at gunpoint, I can play a whole lot of instruments. But at the same time, my main instrument is basically the piano and the keyboards. And
But you have an inclination to the flute too, and I can see that.
I can play like a little bit of each and every instrument pretty much. But then I always believe that if there is an instrumentalist who can do something better than you, then you always have to work with them.
Okay.
So the little bit knowledge that I have in all of these instruments helps me to compose for these particular musicians. Like, for example, if I'm making a song, my little bit of knowledge on the flute helps me compose better for a flute player, or helps me compose better for a Carnatic violin player or for a Hindustani sitar player. So that's what I believe, that it's important to know a little bit about everything so it makes it more conducive towards composing music for these various instrumentalists. And I don't need to be a master of all these all these instruments, because it's better to work with people. And I love working with people. I love collaborating with people, because you're not only bringing the instrument into your music, but you're bringing their mindsets, their musical knowledge, their musical education, their life experiences, their thoughts, their philosophies. And that's what makes a song great.
Right. I'm going to get to the masters who you've worked with. You yourself, of course, are one. But then, when great minds get together,
of course,
fabulous stuff comes out. But I'm going to get to that. But I want to come back to what you were talking about, the dumbing down, I've asked this of many musicians who, I've interacted with, who I've had on the podcast too. The effect of films, one,
yes,
Bollywood music or Kannada film music,
correct,
which you've also been part of that, and jingles.
Yes.
You worked on thousands of jingles,
correct,
I think.
Correct.
So when you work on them, on those, in your mind, do you think of it as another piece of art that you're creating, or is it some dumbing down that you need to do because there's a client that you have to look at?
Yes. So in terms of jingles, I was very happy to work on jingles for about 13 or 14 years of my career. Did more than 3,500 of them. So jingles is a completely different game where, as you said, there's a client involved. There's a brief given to you. And what you create for one particular client has to be completely different. It's about being correct or wrong rather than being high quality or low quality. Like, for example, I can make a really, really high quality jingle for, let's say, a soap brand. Now, it's a very high quality jingle. That same jingle won't work for Mercedes-Benz. So it's all about being right for the brand and wrong for the brand. So one has to just keep that in mind, that it's not about quality, it's about being correct or wrong. So I did that. And of course, I loved working on jingles during the time that I did, because it was almost like a workout. The more you go to the gym, the better you get at it. So in this case, I'm working on one jingle or two jingles for television or for radio in a day. And the more I was working on it, the better I was getting at composition. And every day was a different challenge.
It wasn't stifling, Ricky?
No, it wasn't stifling at all, because it's the way that you look at it.
Okay.
It's the perspective that you have. So for me, it was like, yesterday I would work on a Tamil folk jingle. Today I would work on a Celtic jingle. Tomorrow I would work on, let's say, a hip-hop jingle or a heavy metal jingle. So basically it was completely different genres of music. I'm working with all these different musicians from around the world in fulfilling my vision for each jingle. And then all of those different forms of music find their way into my music. And that's why my music is such a unique brand of various genres of music. And then it sort of sinks in after some time that there are no genres of music. It's just good music and bad music at the end of the day,
Yeah.
So when I make a song today, because of my work in jingles, of course, I don't do that anymore. But because of my work in jingles, it's made me realize that, that you just have to make a good song. You don't have to say that, okay, these are the instruments that I'm going to use in the song, or I'm going to make a great Hindustani classical song, or I'm going to make a great hip-hop song or whatever. I just want to make a good song. That's all.
Yeah, you mentioned Celtic. You've worked with, I think, I remember reading about it, where you had Zulu and you had Kannada and you had Urdu, Pashto, all those, all those words of all this. You don't speak every language.
Correct.
How does it connect to you as a musician? How do these words connect to you?
True. I've just releasing an album right now with Stuart Copeland.
Yeah,
with Stuart Copeland, who is the drummer and the founder of the band The Police. Sold 75 million albums during his career. Also composed music for 50 Hollywood movies. So it's been a pleasure to collaborate with him time and again. Our previous collaboration, Divine Tides, won us 2 Grammy Awards. So this particular album is very interesting because we've got multiple languages. We've got 2 Zulu choirs. We've got an Armenian. We've got a Korean group. We've got one of the biggest superstars in China. We've got Shankar Mahadevan. We've got Salim Suleiman on the album, the Berkeley Indian Ensemble. So it's a very, very interesting confluence of languages. So for me, what interests me a lot about music is, when it comes to lyrics, is the musicality of the language itself. Like how the words flow in a piece of music, and how sometimes the sound of the word conveys an emotion better than what the meaning of the word does. And that is very prevalent in Sanskrit, for example. Sanskrit is my favorite language in the whole world because the words are so beautiful, because the rhythm of the word and the sound of the word conveys a meaning even better if you try to translate the word.
Even the national anthem, right? How many of us know what those words actually mean? But somehow slung together, it just creates a meaning.
Absolutely. It is so rhythmic. It is so beautiful. It is so meaningful, even without knowing the meaning of the words. And that's why for this version of the national anthem that I created, I decided to keep it instrumental, simply because of the magnitude of the orchestra, number one. And number two, more importantly, was that we as Indians, we listen to the instrumental, and I feel that the thought comes out better if you're thinking about the lyrics rather than listening to the lyrics. Because when you listen to that instrumental version of the national anthem, you cannot, if you're an Indian, you cannot listen to that version of the national anthem without thinking of the words,
Yeah, and there's a beat to it,
Yes.
which even if there is a slight variation, you catch on.
You catch on immediately.
That there is something to this.
There's something dissonant to it. There is,
Yeah.
because that's how much ingrained the national anthem is. And I say this time and again that every country has got a national anthem. Every country has got one. And in every country, unlike India, in every country, there is a slight amount of controversy associated with the national anthem.
Yes.
Some people like it, some people don't like it. There is a political divide when it comes to the national anthem, or a few words that people do not like and they say it's controversial. Our Indian national anthem is revered by everybody. Every single person across political ideologies, philosophies, geographic locations, everybody loves our national anthem. So I think it's the best piece of music on this planet.
Yeah, I remember as a kid once saying that why do we say Punjab Sindh? Sindh is not there with us anymore. So why is there still Sindh? And then one person sitting and saying, तो किसने कहा कि वो नहीं हो सकता कभी हो जाएगा? So I said, okay, there are so many
That's a
manifestations.
beautiful perspective.
There are so many manifestations of explanations to the national anthem. You were talking about languages and working with refugees
Yeah.
on the national anthem.
Correct.
Even there must have been accents and there must have been. So tell me about that experience.
So the thing is that, so I do a lot of work with the UNHCR, that is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And to celebrate 75 years of independence, I was speaking with a couple of musician refugees. Now, these are people who had to leave their country because, a lot of them had to leave their country because they are musicians. And it's amazing that India has given them a beautiful home. India has been so accepting and welcoming of them. And they are able to be musicians in India to the extent that, that they can be. So when we were discussing that, how do we celebrate India's independence, they themselves said, "Oh, we know the national anthem perfectly. So we can sing the national anthem to show our appreciation for the country and to show our appreciation to the government and the people." I said, "That's a brilliant idea." So 12 of them, and me being the 13th person, we basically sang the national anthem together. And I did not have to guide them at all. They knew the national anthem beautifully, and they sang it really well. And I can tell you that version, if you go on to YouTube and you check out that version, the pronunciation, the accent, everything is impeccable, and all of them were such brilliant singers. They got it right. It was amazing.
Were you hesitant at any point of time to experiment with the national anthem? Because sometimes there's a blowback.
Yes.
So would you think that let me try with Vande Mataram or Sare Jahan Se Acha? That way, at least there's no blowback. Because we all live in an age of social media. Anything creative which is made, how the film industry is now. There's such a blowback that comes in. So does that make you fearful in some manner?
No, actually, it does not make me fearful at all, because I think, at least in my mind, in my perspective, I believe that nobody respects the national anthem as much as I do. So that is why, for me, the national anthem is sacrosanct. It cannot be tampered with. It cannot be touched. It cannot be reinterpreted in your own style, which is not respectful to the national anthem. So I believe that if I do a version of the national anthem, at least I believe that it'll never be controversial, because I'm sure that it gets the respect that it deserves.
So do you term it as an innovation, or what do you like to call your version of the national anthem? If I want to say the version, what would you call it?
So I would say that it is a different perspective, which is yet respectful to the national anthem. So a respectful variation in perspective.
Okay. We were talking, remember, of jingles when we started off on the other course, and dumbing down of, this is what people say. You say that doing music for jingles gave you a certain discipline, and, you work. But what about your listeners? Do you, when you're in a live audience, as compared to in a studio when you're working with a client, do you have a different mindset when you do that? Like, I guess with an audience, you can just let yourself go. With a client, do you have to dumb down for a jingle? Do you have to work like that for, say, the music industry, the film industry? How do you compartmentalize?
So there are always two ways to do music. One is based on somebody else's sensibilities, where a director comes to you, or a brand manager from a agency comes to you and says that, okay, this is the brief, and you have to create music based on this particular brief. So that is one style of doing music. And sometimes it has to be about figuring out what the current trends are, how to address your particular demographic. If it's a jingle which is meant where the target audience is children, it has to be made in a certain way. If your target audience is women, it has to be made in a certain way. If your target audience is high net worth individuals, then it has to be made in a certain way. Then, of course, when it comes to making music for yourself, which is what I do right now, where I create music based on my own philosophies, my own beliefs, and my own sensibilities, there is no creative block or whatever, because you're just expressing yourself through your music. And that's what I enjoy about my life right now, that I feel strongly about certain things, like when it comes to environmental topics like climate change or species extinction, or celebrating nature in India, celebrating the Western Ghats, or celebrating our biodiversity. So there it comes naturally to me, because these are things that I feel, and these are things that I want to communicate through my music. So it comes very naturally, and there it's not about sitting down and trying to make a piece of music. It just comes automatically, and it just comes easy to me, just like how I'm speaking to you right now. That's how easily the music flows out of me.
How did the environmental part come in your life? At what stage?
So I've always been an environmentalist my whole life. I've always been two things. One is an environmentalist, and the second is a musician. So while growing up, especially as I mentioned, when I grew up in North Carolina, so in Roanoke Rapids, we lived in the middle of nowhere. There were a lot of wooded areas and trees around us, and we would have a whole lot of creepy, crawly, dangerous
yes,
animals.
I've been to North Carolina. I've seen all that.
Like snakes and lizards and frogs and all of these animals walking into our homes. And then what happened was that my parents and my teachers used to tell me that, as soon as you see these animals, step on them and kill them, or run away from them. And my question to them always used to be that if we are supposed to kill them the minute we see them, or we're supposed to run away from them, or they're not important, then why do they exist? They obviously have some sort of significance. And of course, now we all understand what the Vedas have told us like years and years ago, that every single species of animal, no matter how seemingly insignificant, is a very important part of our ecosystem. And it's this delicate balance of our ecosystem that keeps all of us alive. And so I used to look at these animals as being my brothers and sisters and things like that.
That's very early in life.
So I was a very weird child, basically.
Yeah. You grew up in a vegetarian home, or was it?
No, it was a non-vegetarian home, but I converted to vegetarianism about 10 years ago. But my dad has been a vegetarian his whole life, being a Marwadi. So he's been a very, very strict vegetarian. My mom being the exact opposite.
Punjabi, right?
So then my music used to be time and again reflecting the environment, and I used to make music about the environment, but also my commercial work like jingles and stuff like that. Then in 2015, I had a life-changing experience. One is, of course, I won my Grammy Award, my first one. And then Prime Minister Modi invited me for a meeting, which I thought was going to be a 5-minute photo op. And I went and did that meeting. And then Prime Minister Modi and me started speaking about the environment, because he was going to be visiting
South
the climate
Africa.
change conference.
No,
the Paris COP21.
Okay.
So he's going to be visiting the COP21 in December that year. And he told me that he's going to be launching the Solar Alliance. He's going to be giving a speech over there. And, he told me about his perspectives of climate justice and the environment. And then we had this long, beautiful discussion which lasted almost an hour. And then that is when he encouraged me that you feel so strongly about the environment. You're doing all of this work with the United Nations and all of that stuff. So he said that why don't you just dedicate your life? He encouraged me to just dedicate my life and my art solely to the purpose of environmental consciousness and positive social impact. And I left his office thinking that this is exactly what I'm going to do. If the leader of your country is giving you advice, obviously you have to take it very seriously. And I took it very seriously, and that was my life-changing experience, where I had left his office thinking that now every single piece of music that comes off my studio, comes off my fingers, comes out of my head, is going to be about making this world a better place, basically.
So for musicians to be on a mission mode, like you are now, to spread awareness, consciousness, it's a very life-changing experience, isn't it?
It is definitely, because first of all, you're a lot more free. Because I'm making music only when I feel like making music. I'm making music about things that are dear to me. So the creation process of music is very simple. Now, a lot of people want to be artists and they end up becoming professional artists. But within that art form, they're not doing things that they like doing. They're not doing things which are their personality. There are so many Bollywood composers who constantly talk about gender equality, but they've got so many item songs and misogynistic songs which are part of their repertoire, because they're making music that is not who they are as people. And they're being paid to do it. It's a job and all of that stuff. But art has to come from within. Like if you look at a artist like, let's say, Vincent van Gogh. a contemporary artist and one of the greatest contemporary artists ever. So if he was making a new painting, I cannot imagine him going to all the neighboring art galleries and saying, okay, what is everybody doing? What is in trend? Let me do something like that. Or he would just dig deep into his own soul and make a piece of art that is representative of him. Or if I wanted to know what kind of a person Vincent van Gogh was, I'm not going to read a book about him. I'm going to look at all his paintings and say, okay, this guy was a tormented soul. He had a different idea of what the world is. He had a very psychedelic mind and all of that stuff. Why isn't that happening in music in India? Because everybody's aspiration when they become a musician is that I have to do a Bollywood film. If I tell people in India that I'm a composer, and only happens in India, not anywhere else. If I tell people I'm a composer, the first question they ask me is which film?
Yeah.
That is the thing. So that needs to change, I feel. More and more musicians need to come out and and create music which they feel like making, rather than waiting for a producer or a director or an ad agency to come to them and tell them, okay, here's some money, make some music.
I think initially it starts because you got EMIs to pay.
True.
Right? It begins with that you have the bills to pay, you have to put your kids through school, you have to pay the rent. It begins with that, and then somewhere you get stuck in the rut. To break free and do art which gives you, some sense of purpose. And somewhere then it gets lost, I guess,
No, but everywhere else in the world, if you look at it, musicians are creating music and creating their own albums, which have got their unique personality. Like, for example, if you look at an artist like Adele, if you listen to any of her songs, you know how she is as a person.
Yeah.
Or if you look at a person like Britney Spears, you listen to her songs also, you know what kind of a person she is, or Coldplay, or whatever. So that marriage of your personality with your music is something that is very rarely seen in India. That's what I feel.
But if you're prolific and you bring out a lot of poetry, you write a number of plays, you bring out a lot of music, then the artist is lost somewhere, because then it's for the audience. I mean, that's
Correct.
my perspective.
No, true. I agree with you. So the thing is that you have mainstream on one side and then you've got the niche genres on the other side. So the mainstream genres, what happens with that is it's a one-size-fits-all approach. Now, there are advantages to this, there are disadvantages to this. The advantage is obviously you're reaching out to a larger audience. The disadvantage is that you're always the flavor of the month because you do not have a loyal fan base.
Yeah.
Your fan base will listen to you now and then they'll go for the next big hit later on.
Yeah.
And this is even more so pronounced because of streaming, because now there's no pride of ownership. Nobody's going to buy your music and keep it in their home for the rest of their life. They're going to listen to it on Spotify or on Apple Music or whatever, and they're going to move on from it because it's not even going to be stored in your phone.
True.
So it's going to move on. Whereas if you're in a niche genre, then you're going to have a strong audience which is going to remain loyal to you, and it's going to be a smaller audience. But it's going to be that loyal audience which is going to constantly wait for you to come up with your next thing, and they're going to stay with you till the day you die.
Is there an impermanence to your art form, Ricky? Because, see, we were talking about Van Gogh, or if we talk of Shakespeare, it lives on because
Correct.
It's on the church walls, on the ceilings.
Correct.
Shakespeare's plays are there. Again, I come back to that he wrote for somebody. He wrote
Correct.
for money.
Yes.
So you really, to understand what was Shakespeare's life, you need to read about Shakespeare.
Correct.
Because you can't get it from his
And then
plays.
many layers. There are many layers to his
and
life.
layers,
Yeah.
right? So, he could come with a Merchant of Venice, you can come with a Julius Caesar, and you don't know where is Shakespeare in this?
Correct.
Who's the person who's written it? Or if you look at so many of the artists who have painted the church walls or the ceilings, you really don't know where the person is. Was he religious, or was he the disturbed mind,
Yes.
which is right? Now comes to your music. You've played for audiences, you've played in the studio,
Yeah.
you've played in Kannada music,
Yeah.
You've done jingles. Where is the real Ricky? Who is the real Ricky?
Is right now for the last I would say 8 years. Whatever music that I made is basically me. If you listen to any of my music from 2016, that's how I was a person in 2016. Listen to any of my music from 2020, that is exactly who I was in 2020. Listen to my music today, that's who I am as a person today.
Yeah. And you had a studio very early in life.
Correct.
And then you've played, in the best studios of the world. Where do you feel India lacks as far as music studios are concerned? Our technical expertise, does it get stunted because of the lack of facilities here?
No, I think when it comes to music, I think India has got some of the best facilities in the whole world. The best technicians, the best facilities. I think that's not lacking. And music is more or less democratized right now because you can get a really, really good, high quality, international sounding quality album just with a laptop and a microphone nowadays. The only reason why we need the big studios like Abbey Road Studios is if we want to fit in 100 musicians in there. That's the only reason why you need the big studios. Otherwise, you can get a very, very high quality result in a room that is just not even bigger than this room. You can get like a Billboard #1 charting album, which is made in a room which is just about this big.
And the purists who complain about the excessive use of technology in music, taking away the purity of the sound. Like if it's just a flute, there's nothing more pure, I feel, than the sound that comes from little bamboo.
Yeah.
There's nothing purer than that, from that. That's my perspective. But you tell me about the techno element that comes into music.
So there are multiple ways to answer that question. One is, of course, the acoustic sound of an instrument is obviously the best. But this is I'm not even talking about recording. Like, for example, if we were to listen to a flute which was recorded in the highest possible recording quality, whatever, 32-bit, 96 kilohertz, the highest recording quality that technology can offer. We listen to it on a speaker over here, rather than having a flute player stand over here and play in front of us. Now, even if the flute player was playing off-key, and the flute player was a very average flute player, even then we'll enjoy that better than the recording.
Correct.
Because the sound, the resonance and all of that stuff, it's something that is very pleasing to the ear. So recording technology itself, no matter how good the technology is, cannot replace that. But at the same time, I believe that technology has come to such a stage that you can get very realistic sounding sounding instruments with just the computer, without even having a musician. You can get a beautiful violin by just creating the violin piece or the violin solo or a guitar or a sitar on the computer. You get some very, very realistic sounds. And even I've created some of these libraries and sounds. But why I do not use them personally is that for me, it is more beneficial to bring a musician into the studio. Because, especially when it is an Indian musician, because I create a composition and I create a small solo for the sitar player. Sitar player comes in, and the sitar player, with his or her Indian mindset, takes that composition to a whole new level. Because Indian musicians are used to improvisation. They're used to listening to the feel and bringing in their own ideas and their own thoughts, and they go into places where you would never imagine your composition could go into. And I believe that if you give the freedom to an Indian musician to play on your composition, they will take your composition to a whole new level. And they'll take a composition into places that you yourself could not imagine. And they'll bring in their life experiences, their experiences of working with other composers, their, as I said, their music education, their training in the sitar. They'll bring all of that and they will take your composition to whole new levels. And that's what I want to do. For me, it's not just about the sound of the instrument, because I can get the sound of the instrument with a computer. For me, it is the musician that matters and the musician's mindset.
And who are the ones in India who I know it would be unfair for me to ask you to name one or two, whatever. But it's like, when did you realize that, no, the machine's not going to give me what this magic I'm getting in the real playing out here? When did you feel that about Indian music?
So, when I started getting the time to make music. Okay. So when it came to advertising work, you have to deliver something within about 4 or 5 hours, or sometimes like 12 hours or whatever, but never more than a day. So you got very short time to actually deliver a piece of music. So there are a lot of compromises over there. Sometimes you work with musicians if you have the time or if the musicians are available, or you have to do everything on the computer and you have to just deliver it. Whereas when I started making music for myself, after that meeting with Prime Minister Modi, as I mentioned, and I started creating music which is based on my own beliefs and my own philosophies, there I started getting time to make music. So there I could wait for a musician to come into the studio. I could wait for a musician to be available. And then I started working with lots of musicians. I've done more than about 40 or 50 concerts all over the world with Pandit Vishwamohan Bhatt. I've done concerts with
Peter
Aman
Gabriel
Anayan. Yeah, with him I've collaborated in the studio with. And also with Stuart Copeland, done concerts with him, done recordings with him. So I've collaborated with musicians and different musicians. And then I start realizing that for me, that confluence of minds, that confluence of ideas, that heart-to-heart connection that I have with the musician is amazing. I'll give you another example. There's this Algerian violin player that I was and am a huge fan of. And I wanted to collaborate with this Algerian violin player. So I went to Algeria. And I went to the studio and I sat with him. And he only knew Arabic. He did not know any other language. And I knew only English and bits of Hindi. I've always, since childhood, have had a problem with picking up languages. So unfortunately, I don't even know my mother tongue. I've had, I mean, that's for another discussion, but I've had this ADHD problems and all of that stuff. And
No,
you
I
can
want to
make
come
out-
to that because you talked about music and autism once.
Yeah.
So I want to come to that. Yeah, but go ahead.
But the thing is that so I've had difficulty picking up languages. So English is the first language that I learned as a child. So that's the language which I'm most comfortable speaking in. But I could not even communicate with him through even sign language because our reference points are so different and our cultures are so far apart, and it was a very frustrating experience. Then at the end of 2 hours, we decided that we'll probably just give up on this recording. And then I started playing on the piano. I started playing a piece of music. He pulled out his violin and then he started playing along with me. And how he got the emotion right is just pretty shocking, which showcases that music is truly a universal language. And then we just kept playing. We recorded that and that went on to the album, that recording of ours, where we could not communicate through language. We could not communicate through words. We could not communicate through sign language, through gestures, but music got through between both of us, and that is the beauty of music.
You've done hat-trick Grammys. Tell me the first time that you did it, because you talked about being an Indian and with all these greats that you worked with.
Yeah.
But the first time that you got the Grammy, what was that experience? I mean, I'm sure the third one probably is not all that magical, or maybe it is. I don't know. You tell me.
It is.
Okay.
So the Grammys always felt like an unattainable dream, It's a thought that would not even come into our minds, especially doing non-mainstream music, sitting down in India. It was not something that, you watch the Grammys on television and that's the end of it. But then I won my first Grammy when I was 33 years old. It was absolutely amazing. How it works is that the nominations are announced in December every year. I was very shocked to get nominated, like extremely shocked. And then everybody...
Who told you that you've got?
So basically...
and where were you?
I was sleeping and it's nighttime in America. It's nighttime in India and it's daytime in Los Angeles. So they made the announcement and I kept getting these notifications on my phone while I was sleeping. And the notifications were like 5 or 6 a second. And then I went to my phone and looked at it and I kept seeing the word Grammy on every notification. And then finally I realized that, I've been actually nominated for a Grammy Award. So
who did you go and tell the first? Your dad?
The musicians who worked on the album. No, the musician. Of course, I talked to my parents about it. They live with me, and but I spoke to the musicians who were part of the album. That wow, that this is what's happened. And then it's a 2-month waiting period for the actual award ceremony. And everybody would constantly ask me, are you nervous? I'm like, no, I'm not at all nervous because it had not sunk in, That was the reason why I was
What did you wear when you went for that?
So I wore a suit the first time. I wore a tuxedo. And because I wanted to blend in,
Of course.
So that is what. So I wore a tuxedo, and that's like the dress code. Of course, the following times I wore Indian clothes because I realized that that's what I should be doing. But so I went to the ceremony, and when I went to the ceremony, that is when the nervousness started kicking in because I saw all these greats sitting down with me, people who I've admired my whole life, all these legends, and then it became real that wow, this is actually a Grammy Award that I'm up for,
Yeah.
Luckily for me, ours was the first. Ours was the first category to be announced. So because I cannot imagine, even if it was the 5th or 6th category, I don't think I would have been able to sit there without fainting, with the amount of nervousness that I had. So I was the first category that was announced, and they announced that I was the winner.
Do they serve food at all at this? I mean, I know it's a silly question
They
to
don't.
ask.
You have to carry energy bars and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. That at all these.
It's a very tiring process. It's very, very tiring process. And
what did you eat?
I just carried like 2 bars. Two chocolate bars in my pocket because people warned me that you have to do that. You're going to get very hungry. So I did that. Yeah.
Okay. And after you got that, what was it like? Like you came back to the hotel room and you just like, I've got a Grammy.
No, it's quite a stressful process after that because once you win the Grammy, you're taken backstage.
Okay.
And then once you're taken backstage, you have to sign a few contracts and you have to meet with a bunch of people, take some pictures. And then they have all these media rooms. They have got about 30, 35 media rooms where you have to go from media room to media room, give interviews, take photographs and, all of that stuff. Then you have to address a press conference backstage while the awards function is still going on. So you have to do all of it. So all of that takes about 1.5 hours and things like that. And then after that, you get back to your hotel room completely exhausted and then it becomes daytime for India. And then everybody in India start calling up. So basically for the next 2 or 3 weeks, it's non-stop. So you cannot, you don't have the time to actually sit down and revel in the glory that you've just received and all of that stuff.
You get the 3rd Grammy, and when you go up there, what do you think? Been there, done that? Or does it still have that magical feel?
No, it's still as if it is the first time. It's still very, very magical. Because, when we talk about awards itself, there are always two ways to look at awards. One is, vanity that, oh, I'm better than everybody else and whatnot, And I think that's a very wrong perspective to look at awards, because you should not look at awards as being a competition that has been won. I believe that, especially with the kind of music that I make, which is all about advocacy, about spreading a message of awareness, spreading a message about taking action within our own lives, all of that stuff. I believe that awards need to be taken as a very strong platform for us to be doing bigger and better things and to reach our music and the messages that these music bring to a wider and wider audience. And that's how I believe that awards are quite important, because awards give you that platform to do bigger and better things and to reach your message to further audiences.
So at what point of time did the UN reach out to you, and what was their brief to you? What did they expect you to do? And do you find that work fulfilling, the UNHCR work?
So I work with multiple agencies with the UN. I work with the UNCCD, which is the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. It's mainly on climate change issues and issues with when it comes to land degradation and gender equality. The second agency that I work with is the UNHCR, which is a refugee agency. And I also work with the WHO, also work with UNICEF. So basically, I believe that one has to have a very holistic approach towards problem solving. My main focus is the environment. But at the same time, I believe that especially in the global south, everything is about survival and thriving. And environment is looked upon more as a problem of thriving rather than a problem as survival, because problems of survival are current problems, like, immediate problems like poverty, hunger, malnutrition, education, sanitation, gender inequality, gender violence. These are looked upon as problems of surviving. So I very quickly realized that if we were to solve problems of the environment, one has to, first of all, have indigenous solutions within countries and the whole Western narratives, which are a one-size-fits-all approach cannot work. Like, for example, if you go to a rural area anywhere in the global south where there is a lot of poverty, and if you tell them that, let's make a better future for our children and our children's children, they'll be like, what about me,
Yeah.
Like, what about me? I don't have electricity, or I don't have energy, I don't have a good standard of living. Or if you tell them, like the Western narratives of we have to consume less of everything, they'll be like, we don't have enough to consume, first of all,
Yeah.
So that is why one has to ensure that you have to be realistic, this whole armchair activism when it comes to
The language is
environment.
only different.
The language is also different.
No, what I mean is that the language of environmentalists, of, consume less and all, it's alien to people who don't have.
Exactly. And I see this happening in the big cities in India too,
Yeah.
where everybody talks about stop this, stop that, and
Plastics.
yeah.
Just stop. How are they supposed to?
Yeah, because
Sometimes.
everything is about. Of course, plastics is a huge problem.
But-
But at the same time, one has to take an account of convenience, of cost, of whether alternatives are available. So one needs to do that, and we have to figure out ourselves, that how do we reduce our consumption of plastics? So it needs to come at an individual level, and that's going to be extremely important.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is why I decided that I'm going to have a very holistic view towards problem solving, where I have to look at solving many problems in order to get into solve the problem, which is my main objective of mitigating the effects of climate change.
Like, for the podcast, I met with a tribal activist in Madhya Pradesh.
Yeah.
Now, what he was saying was like, okay, we're not anti-development.
Yes.
But if you actually see, you're building a highway out here, fine, you have to build a highway, fine, you have to, development has to happen, and those tribals are going to get displaced. You give them, okay, I'm going to build a building, and here is your apartment, which you'll get in lieu of that land that you were living off the forest. So you go and live in Indore.
Yeah.
I'm taking your land away in Madhya Pradesh for a highway which is to come. So you've displaced that tribal and put him in or his family into a flat in Indore. He doesn't know how to. He doesn't know how to sustain himself and his family. They've only lived off the forest. So, the development at what cost? And then there is no secondary. There's no training him for something else. So there are, there these divisions which happen. So that's where I was like, okay, fine, environmental and all fine, and development fine, but where are they going to marry?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to get a little philosophical to answer your question. Now, there's a problem because we as human beings have hijacked the word development itself. And so much so that we've got a separate term which is known as sustainable development. Now, sustainable development does not make sense to me because by nature of the word, development itself has to be in collaboration with the environment or in coexistence with nature. But when we think about development, the only thing we think about is basically paved highways, and we think about New York skyline and concretization and all of that stuff. So development itself should always mean that we are developing together, not just with human beings, but with all species, with the forest and wildlife, because it's not about just keeping the forest and wildlife intact. We need them. We need the forest and wildlife intact for our own survival.
Correct.
So that is what needs to be understood. And instead of the word sustainable development, there needs to be another term for unsustainable development, because development by nature of the word itself should be in coexistence and in balance with nature, and that is what is extremely important, because we keep talking about saving the planet. We keep talking about saving the world. We are too insignificant a species to even talk about that, simply because when we talk about mitigating the effects of climate change, stopping global warming, temperatures are rising, the planet will survive without us. The planet, in fact, will thrive if there are no human beings on this planet.
Yes, that's true.
What
More
we are
of
trying
us spoil the planet.
Exactly. And what we are actually trying to do by mitigating the effects of climate change and by stopping global warming is trying to ensure that we do not create an inhospitable environment for us human beings to live on this planet. Because if we go on with business as usual and climate change has its effects and its disastrous effects, global warming reaches a stage which is above the tipping or beyond the tipping point, then we won't be able to live on this planet. And we will not survive because the heat will be too much for us to bear. The cyclones and hurricanes are getting worse and worse with every passing day. We see it in the news. So we are creating an inhospitable environment for us. So what we are doing by being responsible to the environment is basically not saving the planet, but we are saving ourselves. We are saving us human beings.
You were talking about the Western Ghats and environment and things like that. It's important for you because being a Bangalorean, you know how important the Western Ghats are. I mean, and I know because cousins of mine, when we were going, monkey menace, they come and ruin our crops. And they keep talking about that. And then a bunch of my cousins and friends and all, they took it upon themselves that it's the monsoon season. They take all the mango seeds that they've consumed, the mangoes, they just go on a picnic, they go on the ghats, on Agumbe Ghat, and they just keep throwing it. And there'll be fruit trees. They don't need nurturing. You put the fruit trees, the monkeys will not come down to your...
Correct.
To your farms and destroy because there are fruit trees. This is what Hema Malini has been saying in Mathura. In Mathura, there is a problem with monkeys. And in Simla, there's a problem. You cut down their fruit trees, where are they going to go? So if you can get, the word environmentalist, as soon as I'll say Ricky Kej is an environmentalist, everybody will think, here... Activist.
Yeah. But I'm a person who believes in advocacy because I believe in working with people rather than working against people and protesting.
So that's what I'm saying. If there's a positivity attached to an activist, environment activist, rather than, this militant person who will go on a dharna and say...
But then you're driving people away. You're not bringing people together. But now that you brought up this topic of the monkeys, I'll give you another example. Now, do you remember in 2020 when the pandemic had just started, there was this very powerful image of a female pregnant elephant in the middle of a water body, and she like a dead female pregnant elephant who was in the middle of a water body, and this image had gone all over the world. This happened in Kerala. Image went all over the world. It was on CNN, it was on BBC, it was of course on all the Indian networks and all of that stuff. So that was a very powerful image, and it captured everybody's imagination, and it brought about a lot of emotions. So the story of that was that this female pregnant elephant, she walked out of the forest in search of food, and she went to this farmland. And when she entered this farmland, she ate a pineapple. Little did she know that the pineapple was laden with explosives. So she ate the pineapple, and then what happened is that it fatally damaged her mouth. And then she wobbled her way through while she was dying, and she walked to this lake. She stood in the middle of the lake and she passed away. And that image was very powerful, her standing while she was dead. And of course, she was pregnant, so that made things even more emotional. And there was a whole lot of knee-jerk reactions across the world that the farmer should be killed, the farmer should be hung upside down, the farmer should be put into jail for the rest of his life. And yes, he should be punished. But the problem is that we as city people, we live in bubbles, and we do not look inwards to see how am I at fault for this thing to happen. And then if you think about it, we as city people, if we do not have electricity for 3 minutes, we are so inconvenienced. If a new iPhone comes out or a new Android phone comes out, and they're out of stock. We're like, why can't they make more of those? What's wrong with them? Why can't they make more of these gadgets? Why can't they make them fast? Now, if you think about it, where is all that coal coming from for making our electricity? It's coming from digging up those forests. Where is all that, cadmium, lithium, magnesium, silica, iron, all of that, where is it coming from for building our electronic gadgets? It's coming from digging up those forests. So it's our consumption patterns. It's simply our consumption patterns which are basically destroying those forests. When those forests are destroyed, the elephants have no other alternative but to walk outside the forest to get their food. They go to a fringe area where there is a farmland. Now the farmer has to make the very painful and punishable offense, and the farmer should be punished, but the farmer has to make this very painful decision to save his or her livelihoods, to save the lives of his or her family and children by doing this ridiculous thing of putting explosives in a fruit. And, basically that's what's happening. So what needs to happen is that all of us, instead of protesting, instead of looking at what other people can do, waiting for governments to take action, waiting for intergovernmental bodies to take action, we need to look inwards and see, what can I do? How can I change my consumption pattern? We need to realize that we are significant. We may say that, oh, if I stop using single-use plastics, what difference will it make? Or if I do not buy the latest iPhone and I wait maybe 1 more year or 2 years to buy another iPhone or an electronic gadget so that I reduce my consumption of electronic and I create less electronic waste, what difference will it make? But all of these things are very significant, and we need to understand that we are significant, and whatever changes we make in our own tiny incremental capacity actually matters.
How are you using your music to pass on this message? Because these are two things that matter so much to you in life. Your one is your creativity, and two is these issues which matter so much to you. How do you marry these two now?
It's basically whatever I feel strongly about, it's communicated through music. So that's the way it is. I've also started a children's education program known as My Earth Songs. So that is basically about 30 songs which are like nursery rhymes and adolescent rhymes, which are currently in textbooks in India. We are and in other English-speaking countries. We are in, I think, currently about almost 20 million textbooks all over the world, where each song is about a different topic. They are very fun rhymes, very positive, very energetic, very catchy. The minute you listen to it, children continue singing it, because the songs that you learn during your childhood are songs that you never forget. So that's a principle that we've gone with. So these songs have been very successful because you are starting the conversation on conservation very early, with children. And I believe children are always born with an inherent love for nature, with inherent compassion, with inherent kindness, with inherent empathy. But what we are doing with our education systems and all of that stuff all over the world is we are systematically erasing that from our children. That's what I believe. So the idea of these songs is to continue to keep these amazing qualities that children are born with.
Okay. Two things that I want to talk about is, one, you said that music should be part of the school curriculum. Growing up in the Indian education system, music was part of SUPW, socially useful, productive work.
Yes.
Right?
Like hobbies.
Like hobbies. You were not graded on it, so nobody paid attention.
Even libraries also today, music is always kept in the hobby section.
In the hobby section, right? So, in fact, even if you go to a shop, you go to where books and toys and everything is, you will not find anything on music. You'll have to hunt for the art section to find anything on performing arts. Will be in some corner.
Correct.
So, one, you said music should be part of the school curriculum. Should it be graded or not, and how important should it be? Two, I've read an interview of yours where you said that music can even help in improving the skills in autism-affected children. So, both these, if you could explain to me.
So firstly, I believe that music should be a very important part of the education system. Whether it's graded or not, I'm not sure, because I'm not an educationist. But I believe that it strongly helps the cognitive abilities of a children, their critical thinking. Also, it has been widely proven everywhere in the world that children who are well versed with music are very good at other things. They sort of develop abilities when it comes to maths, when it comes to sciences. Even when it comes to language abilities.
Most famous of musicians have been mathematicians too.
Exactly. Yeah. Like Albert Einstein, and of course the father of nuclear sciences in India, Dr. Raja Ramana. So all of them have been musicians.
APJ Abdul Kalam was
APJ Abdul Kalam ji was also a musician. So I think music can play a very, very important role in the overall growth of a child. And also, as I mentioned earlier, that when it comes to music, you want to uplift the art, you want to uplift musicians, you want to uplift the creativity, and the only way for that to happen is for musicians, for the whole of India to be sensitized to music, and that will help the art form itself grow.
And it doesn't matter whether it's classical or non-classical, right? Any form of
music, whatever the education is find will be interesting for children.
Okay.
That's all that matters. So I grew up with the ADHD, that is attention deficit hyperactive disorder. As maybe your listeners could figure out, I speak very fast, I'm very fidgety. These are things that I have to control, and I've been controlling since my childhood. I was a very bad learner. I had a severe form of dyslexia, and I still do, where when I read a book, and that's why I don't read books, because when I read a line and then I go on to the next line, the first line looks completely different when I go back to it. So I have all of these problems. So music was the one thing that kept me sane, and music is the one thing that that I could fully understand and was good at.
How did you go through? Because in the 90s, not many schools in India knew about dyslexia and ADHD. How did you go through schooling, and how did you go through a dental college? That's a lot of pressure.
No, it was very difficult. So schooling was that basically everybody used to call me stupid. So that's how I went through it. And everybody would, my classwork books would come back with red circles, like, 3 or 4 red circles every line. And I was punished a lot. So it was very difficult for sure, because there was no sensitivity for these problems. And then, of course, I found a lot of coping mechanisms because I had to do this myself. So as early as the 5th or 6th grade, I started realizing that if my textbooks are colored, it works a lot. So I would underline my textbooks. I would sometimes use marker pens to color each line separately. So there were a lot of coping mechanisms that I had.
And on your own, you figured?
I had to figure it out on my own. There was no other way.
Nobody in school who helped you through this?
No, because the thing is that, and it's not nobody's fault actually, because nobody was sensitized to it the way that now
but
people...
But your father's a physician.
No, father also helped quite a lot.
Okay.
He did help quite a lot.
But he knew that it was this?
He knew, but at some level, he definitely knew it. Okay. At some level, he definitely knew it. But I guess my father also is a person who loves me a lot, so he did not want me to feel any different,
Yeah.
So I guess, it was a balance on that, where he did not want me to feel any different, so he would not overemphasize things. But he and my mother used to show me a lot of empathy, that is for sure.
Okay.
Like when my classroom books would come back with a lot of red spellings, I never got any scoldings from my parents. That was never there, because obviously in their mind they knew that something was wrong.
Okay. But in spite of that, you go into dental college,
Yeah.
and the curriculum is very heavy.
That was also very difficult. So again, if you look at my dental textbooks, I don't know whether I still have them, but marker pens were my friends, I used to mark every single line with a different color, and, and I used to try to learn, and I used to buy hard things and all of that stuff. But then I'd sworn that after I finish my dentistry, I'm not going to read a book again. So I've not read a single novel, not read a single book. And at the same time, comic books were things that I could read really well, because there's additional stimulus, like the pictures and all of that stuff. The fonts are different. They're more exciting. So those were things. And now with the internet, when I read articles which have got pictures in them and the font sizes are bigger, and, and there's a little bit of music playing in the background. So the more stimulus that I get, it's easier for me to read.
And
so,
you got gifted in some other way, in some divine way, that you had some other gift where this was lacking in your life.
True, but that is also something that, if I may say so, which could be a little controversial, but I do not like the way that movies portray children, especially when it comes to autism spectrum disorders, because they always show that if a child has got autism, they somehow get victorious in something else. Like Tare Zameen Par, for example. There's a child with autism, and they've beautifully shown that. But at the same time, they show that the child wins a competition at the end.
Yeah.
Or if you have a film like Rain Man, the film with Dustin Hoffman.
Yes.
The guy is a genius at mathematics. Or you see the comedy movie, The Hangover. The guy is obviously at some spectrum disorder when it comes to autism. And he's a genius at blackjack and counting cards. And then you have Forrest Gump. He's a genius at running or whatever. Yeah. That is something that puts undue pressure on parents, because parents are like, Mera beta aise hai, he's like this. He has to have some sort of genius in him,
Yeah.
or her. So that, I think, should not be done, because it's not the case every time. Sometimes a child will not have that stroke of genius, or maybe the child will go through his or her entire life and you will not be able to discover what that genius ability is.
Right.
And we should not be putting that kind of pressure on parents, because even when the few people who I speak to about what I went through, they immediately say, oh, that is why you are a musician. I'm like, no, that is not. Do not imagine that a child who is going through this.
Thanks for correcting me. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But did you then, when you were learning music, did you find the same kind of, like you got to learn notes? How did you learn that then?
I guess people who are in these, who are on these spectrums, I guess, they think differently. Like, they think, like Elon Musk, for example. He's got Asperger's syndrome,
Yes.
which is on the autism spectrum disorder. He thinks differently. So similarly for me, I think music just came easy to me. But what I'm trying to say is that for some people,
Yes.
maybe they may not have that.
Correct.
Or they will, or there's a possibility that skill would have never been discovered till the day they die, So that is why I said that, that parents should not be put under this pressure,
Did you, because of the barbs and the negativity that was part of your childhood and growing up years, did that in any way contribute to your music also in some way? Was there more depth? Was there an anger? Was there something that went into your
No,
music?
not an anger. Definitely not an anger. But I guess music was my refuge, Like I could sit down in my room and either play music loudly or, sort of like, play a musical instrument. Because the thing is that my obsession with music started off not with an instrument, but listening to music. My father in America, he had this huge music collection, music collection from different parts of the world, not just the hits of that time, like, the Bollywood music, the Mohammed Rafi music and the Kishore Kumar music and all of that stuff, and even the Bee Gees and Michael Jackson and Madonna. But he also had a lot of music from, like Zulu music from South Africa. He had some really cool music from different regions of the world, like from European countries, from Southeast Asian nations and all of that stuff. And I would listen to all of this music, understand these different cultures, understand. So a lot of my understanding also of how this world works came through music, understanding cultures, understanding traditions, understanding mindsets. And also, like if you look at history itself, like in a country like the United States of America, their history has been chronicled through music. The Dust Bowl era has got songs written about it. You have the hippie era, songs written about it. Vietnam War, World War I, World War II, the Trumpism, 9/11. There are songs written about that, and history of the country itself is chronicled through music, and you learn so much through learning through just listening to music. And that's how my childhood was. I learned a lot of what I know just through listening to music and listening to musicians. And digressing a little bit, that's also one of the things that I feel about India, that since Bollywood has got such a strong hold on music, we are losing out on that, of chronicling our history through music. Because pretty much every song that comes out of India that goes mainstream is either a love song or an item song. And I wish, more and more musicians would make music from the heart, because then our history also will be chronicled through
There's
music.
a lot of socialist era music also. When you look at that period of the 70s,
Yeah.
the industry, that is our period of industrialization.
correct.
And like the Manoj Kumar songs, eulogizing the farmer or the industrial worker, that, but I guess nobody has chronicalized it like you're saying happens in America. A lot of your music is made in America too, right? Is there a more affinity towards America that you have when you make the music there? You haven't released anything in.
So I'll give you an example. Now, if you look at Pandit Ravi Shankar, everybody in India know who he is. Pandit Ravi Shankar. You ask anybody on the street who's Pandit Ravi Shankar, sitar player. What is the biggest award that he's won? Bharat Ratna. Everybody knows that. Who is his daughters? Anushka Shankar, Nora Jones. Everybody knows that. And I can challenge you this. In your office or anywhere in the street, ask them to name one album of Pandit Ravi Shankar. Nobody will be able to name one. He's done more than 20 albums. Nobody will be able to name an album. You ask them to name one song of his. Nobody will be able to name one. You ask anybody in the whole of India to hum a tune of his. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
And that is because Pandit Ravi Shankar, even though he was playing pure Indian music, he was not doing hip-hop music. He was not doing... When he would perform in America, he was not doing hip-hop music. He was not doing Western music. He was playing pure Hindustani classical music on one instrument, that is a sitar. But he was getting more appreciation for his music outside than in India. Yeah. And the same question, if I was to throw in San Francisco or Sausalito or in New York, there are more people who will be able to answer the name of his albums than in India. And that is a trend that really needs to change in India, because I believe that we need to appreciate this amazing talent, so much so that why did Pandit Ravi Shankar settle down outside of India?
Ustad Zakir Hussain.
Ustad Zakir Hussain, Ustad
Lives in
Ali
San Francisco,
Akbar Khan.
Ali Akbar Khan, yes.
Ali Akbar Khan Saab, Anushka,
Yeah.
everybody have basically, why are these people getting more recognition for their Indian music outside of India than they are in India? So this is what I call the Pandit Ravi Shankar syndrome. So for me, I had a very life-changing experience, another one, when I was starting off my musical career when I was 19 years old. So there I'd watched quite a few Bollywood concerts in America by then, because I used to travel to America on holidays and things like that. So then over there, what happened is that I watched this. So basically, like when you go to a Bollywood concert, Bollywood basically they can fill up stadiums, they can fill up complete arenas and all of that stuff doing doing Bollywood music. But the people who show up for those concerts are just the Indian diaspora. So because Bollywood, with a few exceptions, Bollywood music has actually not broken cultural barriers. Bollywood music reaches out all over the world, but to the Indian diaspora.
Jai Ho did.
As I said, few exceptions.
Yeah.
The exceptions can be counted on your fingertips, the number of songs that have actually broken cultural barriers. Whereas, when I watched a Pandit Ravi Shankar concert in San Francisco, I was very shocked that the demographic of the people within the theatre was very representative of the demographic of the people who are representative of the city. The city had about a 80% Caucasian population. There was 80% Caucasian population inside the theatre. About a 5 or 6% Asian population, only 5 or 6% inside the theatre was Asian. And
Don't you think it's Ravi Shankar is because of the Beatles connection?
Whatever
that's
it
why?
is, but he's playing Indian music.
Okay.
So that is the most important thing. So basically, he was introducing a whole bunch of people who are normally not exposed to Indian music, because that concert that I saw of his was a pure Hindustani classical concert. And so that when I was sitting down in the theatre, I felt that, wow, this gentleman is playing pure Indian music and he's getting all of these white people to listen to him and enjoy his concert and revere his music. He is truly taking Indian music to the world stage and he's truly breaking cultural barriers.
And people were paying to come and listen
And
to
people
it.
were paying a huge ticket price to come and sit down in the audience and actually listen to him. So I thought that these classical musicians are the ones who are actually breaking cultural barriers. I've seen a couple of Pandit Vishwamohan Bhatt's concerts in America. Again, people from every demographic, people from every ethnicity are basically enjoying his concerts. Same thing with Aman and Ayan. They're also doing a fantastic job. So basically, I believe that it is the Indian classical musicians who are the flag bearers when it comes to spreading our Indian culture and our traditions, because they are doing such a good job of doing that.
Where do you find satisfaction, playing to an audience or when you're creating music in a studio? Where do you find that I've reached that pinnacle of creativity?
I think both of them go hand in hand. I love the creative process working in the studio and creating my music. I just love that, working with musicians and building up something from nothing to building up something that is that I find completely amazing. Because at the end of the day, I will never put out anything that I myself do not find amazing. So that satisfaction of creating something that I feel that, wow, this is something that I would love listening to. But at the same time, playing it in front of an audience where you get the appreciation and that feedback almost instantaneously. That is a feeling that is unparalleled. Okay. Of getting the audience to groove to what you're doing and to appreciate it, seeing them smile in the audience, hear them clapping at the end of the piece of music. That is an unparalleled experience. But that could have not happened if I did not work hard in the studio in the first place.
Tell me about Winds of Samsara. Like, what did it mean? You're a young man in the 80s and 90s. Mahatma Gandhi wouldn't have had that much of an impact on your psyche as a growing person. Nelson Mandela wouldn't have happened. South Africa became free towards the end. When you were still probably a teenager or something. And living in Bangalore, you're probably not impacted by either of the two men. Then you bring out this music, which is about that period, or those two individuals, or the impact of those two individuals on this millions and billions of people. Around the world, not just in India or in South Africa. Tell me about that experience.
So, Winds of Samsara, so there's this amazing South African flute player, a gentleman called Wouter Kellerman. I was a huge fan of his music. He's a huge fan of my music, and we decided that let's work together. So we met in Los Angeles and we were discussing about ways we could work with each other. And there was a huge coincidence that came about that I was just finishing. Not yet finished, but I was just finishing off an instrumental piece which I was creating, which was inspired by the ideals of peace and tolerance by Mahatma Gandhi. And he had, the coincidence was that he was just finishing a piece of music which was about his father of the nation, that is Nelson Mandela. And we realized there's a whole lot of cross-pollination over here because, as we all know, Mahatma Gandhi spent his formative years in South Africa, and Nelson Mandela was heavily inspired by the non-violence movement by Mahatma Gandhi. So we decided this is how we'll work with each other. You send me your South African music, I'll add some Indianness to it. I'll send you my Indian music, you add some South Africanness to it. And we worked for about 2.5 years, learned a lot about these two gentlemen, and learned a lot about what they meant to the world, what their ideologies were, what they stood for as world leaders. And we created this album. It took us about 2.5 years, and that was Winds of Samsara.
Okay. Tell me what it is. You worked with so many masters
Yeah.
of music. Do you get overawed at some point of time? Of course, you've got a fabulous track record of your own, but do you get overawed? And have you met somebody and said, "Oh my God, I've learned so much today"?
No, true. Like when it comes to musicians, Stuart Copeland would be the best example, because I grew up with posters of him on my wall, and and completely revered his music, revered his work with the Police, the band that he formed. So the thing is that for me, working with him on Divine Tides, the album that won us 2 Grammy Awards, that was quite a magical experience, because it was sort of like a masterclass of sorts. Because right up until then, I was in complete control of my music. Complete control, where I'm the decision maker, and and I'm everything is like whatever, however I want it to be. But now I'm working with a very senior person, so I have to learn from this person, and I'm collaborating with this person. So I cannot like demand things from this person. So I made a very strong commitment to myself that if he asks for a change, or if he does something differently than what I thought it should be done with, I would keep quiet about it, and I would keep quiet about it for 2 weeks. Okay, and at the end of 2 weeks, after I've lived with it, if I still feel that this is not the way it should be, then I will voice my opinion. And this happened so many times over the course of making the album, that he would tell me to do something, or he would play something, and I'd be like, that does not work at all. It's not working for the track at all. And I would live with it for 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, I would realize that, wow, thank God I did not say anything about it. Okay. It just works. Because sometimes you yourself are so married to your own ideas that the ego within you prevents you from thinking that another perspective actually works, or you feel that you are right, and you fall in love with your own ideas.
So what's this new thing that you're doing, Beyond Borders?
So Beyond Borders is basically Police Beyond Borders. It's a new album that we've just finished, and the album is going to be releasing in a week's time. So it's an album that what we've done is that, of course, I've grown up listening to the songs of the Police, which
this
was
is also with Stuart Copeland.
With Stuart, correct. I've grown up listening to the songs of the Police, songs like Every Breath You Take, and songs
Every Move
like
You Make. Yes, we've all grown with that.
Yeah, and then Message in a Bottle and Roxanne.
Yes.
So all these famous songs that Stuart's band has created.
Yeah.
And of course, Stuart has created these songs, and I've grown up listening to these songs in my childhood. So what we did is that we took these songs, Stuart arranged them for symphony orchestra, and we recorded these songs in Dublin with the Dublin Symphony Orchestra. And then after that, what we did was that we took every single song, and we got a singer or an ensemble or a choir in a different country to sing it in their own language. So like, for example, Every Breath You Take is sung in Zulu by the Soweto Gospel Choir. We have Message in a Bottle sung by Salim Suleiman in Hindi. We have got Murder by Number sung by Shankar Mahadevan in Hindi. We have Tea in Sahara sung by Sijuan, who is the biggest star in China, singing it in Mandarin. Then we have Serge Tankian from Armenia, very famous guy, lead singer of System of a Down, one of the greatest bands of today's times. He's sung a song in Armenian. So we have all of these different languages. And so we've taken the Police songs and we've reinterpreted these songs for a global audience to showcase that music is not just about language and about lyrics, but it's about the musicality of the words itself, what we just spoke about. And music is a true unifying force.
And Beyond Borders, as the name
And
suggests.
that's why the name of the album is Beyond Borders.
Okay. So as I'm winding up, I'm going to ask you one question which I've asked many musicians about spirituality.
Yes.
And whether that is important for musicians to have that spiritual connection in some form or the other.
Yeah.
Do you need a guru for that? Do you need, what is your spiritual path been?
So full disclosure, when it comes to religion, when it comes to mindsets, and when it comes to my philosophy, I'm a very, very proud Hindu, but at the same time, I'm an atheist. Because atheism is very much within Hinduism.
Correct.
So I absolutely love and I follow the Gita, I follow the Vedas, because I believe it's a very, very good standard of living your life. And it's a very good standard of living in coexistence with the environment, living in collaboration with the environment. and making this world a better place, not just for us and not just for us human beings, but for everyone, everything, and every species. But at the same time, I'm an atheist, and I myself, I'm not a spiritual person, even though a lot of people feel that my music is spiritual. What I believe spirituality is, in my mind, is that sometimes we look at a sunset, which is absolutely beautiful and it's overwhelmingly beautiful. Or you listen to a beautiful piece of music. Like, for example, when you listen to, let's say, a beautiful piece of Hindustani classical music, a beautiful rag played by, let's say, Pandit Ravi Shankar, it sort of transports you to a different world.
Yeah.
And your brain cannot fathom how beautiful this is, because your primitive brain cannot fully understand the beauty of that music. So then it immediately attributes it to a higher plane.
Some divinity somewhere.
Some divinity somewhere it attributes it to, because you just can't understand the beauty of it and the overwhelming nature of it. Many times I listen to a piece of music and I get tears in my eyes.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm sad, it's not that I'm happy, but that music was so overwhelming. The power of that music was so overwhelming that it brings tears into my eyes.
True.
Sometimes when I'm on a beach and I look at a beautiful sunset, again I get tears in my eyes. I'm not happy, I'm not sad. Why do I get tears in my eyes? Because my brain just can't understand the beauty of this. So that is what I believe, that sometimes few things are so beautiful that you do not understand the beauty of it and you attribute it to a higher plane, and that is what I believe is spirituality. So when somebody tells me that they had a spiritual connect with my music, I believe that, okay, I've been successful, because I've had that overwhelming power over that person through my music, and I'm like, wow, mission
It's
successful.
Like, I once went for a dance performance by this very eminent dancer called Dr. Padma Subramaniam.
Of course.
You've heard of her.
Yeah.
And she was doing a number in which, she looks at Krishna coming down.
Yeah.
From the sky, she's coming down.
Correct.
And the way she was emoting, I saw in the audience people looking up. Do you understand? It's like they actually thought that Krishna is coming down because her emotions were so much. And
that is a spiritual experience. There's nothing but a spiritual
experience. And then I attended a concert once of Dr. Rajkumar. Now, he's a film person.
Yes,
he's an actor.
Correct.
But he was such a fabulous singer.
Correct.
I understand Kannada, but I don't understand Kannada to that extent that I can understand words, lyrics.
If given
all that
context,
much.
yeah.
I know spoken Kannada,
Correct.
but I don't understand that pure Kannada. Which
I understand.
Yeah. But when he was singing, it was a devotional song, and I was just a student. For me, God and divinity and spiritualism wasn't part of my existence. But when he was singing, it was literally, I felt, transported to another level. And when I discussed it with my brother, who is like a Pink Floyd, and and he was like, "Are you mad? Why would you feel that?" I was like, "No, I did. I don't know what it was, but I did." And I must have been 8 or 10 years old or something like that when I said. So that's when I felt that, yes, performing arts, some people might demean it, but there is a connection to spirituality.
Absolutely. Because the thing is that art is something that is unquantifiable. You cannot quantify art. You cannot quantify as to what it does to us as a person. It is more of an emotional connect. Because I mean that if you do not emotionally connect with a piece of art, you can never love it. So it can happen even with a painting. It can happen with even a photograph. It can happen with music. It can happen with film. It can happen with so many other things, So I believe that, that's what a successful artist is, the one who's had that emotional connect and that spiritual connect with somebody.
I also ask people about physical and mental well-being in all my podcasts, because I think to create something, you need to have both.
Correct.
How important is it for you, and how do you detoxify yourself from all the messaging that comes in via social media? And I remember one tweet of yours became very viral when you landed in India, and you said that this is not the way. And there was a lot of blowback.
Yeah, huge blowback.
Yeah. So I'm sure, many of us, lesser mortals, also get a lot of it. How do you cope with that?
I mean, I'm still learning. So I guess a short answer to that question would be that it's very difficult to stay away from all of that, because the thing is that there's so much of stuff thrown at us on a daily basis. There's so much of material. Many times when I'm sleeping, I go on to Instagram and then I'm on an endless scroll, of watching all these short videos. It becomes addictive, especially these short cooking videos that people have, no?
Yeah.
Or these street food videos.
So that's your Punjabi in you.
Yeah, so then I'm just watching that, and then at about 2 o'clock at night when I'm going to sleep, I'm like watching that, and then suddenly I start feeling hungry, after watching all of that. So again, as I said, short answer to your question, I've not figured out how to do it. So if you figure it out, then teach me how.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to taste that Mysore Pak.
Yeah.
Right? And since you're a Bangalorean, I'm going to ask you that there's people who come on social media and say that Mysore Pak is Tamilian or Kannadiga. What do you think?
It's definitely Kannadiga. It's Mysore Pak. And this is a very good example of it.
So there you are. So viewers, listeners, we have a Grammy winner, three-time Grammy winner, who certified that Mysore Pak is Kannadiga. So then that debate is over. I had Vikram Sampath on the show, and I made him say that to all the show. So, but of course, I haven't bullied you. I just asked you to.
No, it's definitely Kannadiga. Like the whole debate of rasgullas, right?
Right. Udiya or Bengali.
Or Bengali.
Right? And is food important to you in life? Is that like...
No, I love eating food. I love food.
Okay.
But I've got just few things that I like, and I don't experiment much.
Okay.
Like, for example, I like, let's say, I like paneer butter masala.
Okay.
So that's my favorite dish. So whichever restaurant, for me, the experimenting is eating paneer butter masala from multiple restaurants.
But you're a Bangalorean. How can paneer butter masala be your...
That's the thing, and probably, it's going to be a controversial statement that I'm going to make. But the darshanis in Bangalore, that is the places which normally serve dosas and vadas and all of that stuff, they make the best paneer butter masala, even better than the ones.
I know.
Because it's nice and spicy. They put onions in it. They put beautiful masalas into it. So whenever, for my favorite paneer butter masala is the paneer butter masala that is made in Karnataka Darshanis.
I don't want to disagree with you because I want you to say that it is benne masala dosa or something like that you like.
I love that also. I love that also.
And you come on and you say that in Darshini you are having paneer butter. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But and also I think it will strike a chord in many expat Indians for whom, when they connect with India, it's with the food and it's with the music.
Correct.
Right? Like your dad.
Yes.
Lived in Myanmar and went and lived in North Carolina, but had Mohammed Rafi and, so your music bridges that and it's without borders.
Yes.
I'm finding so many metaphors.
I know. But that's what. Whatever it is, my music is always Indian. That's what.
I have to ask you this. You travel, you've performed in more than 30 countries or something like that?
Yeah, easily. Now it's more, now it's close to 40 actually now.
Do you travel with Indian food? Do you find Indian food, seek out Indian food wherever you are?
I seek out Indian food, but if I'm in a city, which is very rare, if I'm in a city for more than 2 days. Because I think on the third or fourth day is when I start missing Indian food. And then I have to seek it out. But in some European countries where they're completely snowed in, like countries like Poland, there they cannot grow vegetables during the winter time.
Okay.
So they have to have frozen vegetables, which they have to cook later on. So the Indian food isn't that great because they have to use frozen vegetables. But nevertheless, even then, I still eat it because, and of course, Indian restaurants are in every city, everywhere in the world.
Yeah. So when fans come to you, what do they ask? The first thing that they ask you is like, play this music for us, play this Bollywood song or Kannada song. When they come up to you, what do they ask you?
In what context?
Like when they come in a live concert, when they come to you after the show or before the show, do they have requests when they ask you for something?
But the thing is that my shows, I only play my own music at my shows.
Correct.
So it's only so the requests come from my repertoire of music.
Okay. So you're not burdened with that thing that
No, I'm not burdened with that at all because for me, my audiences are very clear when they come for my shows that the only music that I play is basically my own compositions.
Also, you mentioned about how after your meeting with Mr. Modi, it just changed your perspective as to what all the impact that you can have with your music.
Correct.
And what you want to do in life. Is there anybody else that like Mr. Modi that you've met who had that impact on you in life that you said, okay, this is how I want my music to be?
It's a difficult question to ask, but I think that has had the singularly largest impact on me. Okay. Meeting Prime Minister Modi and his appreciation for my music and his appreciation for what I was doing. Because it sort of gave purpose to my music and it gave purpose to my life. And even though that was something that I wanted to do, it was on the back of my mind that, that I should stop all forms of commercial music and I should utilize the power of music. Because at the end of the day, why do these big brands use music for their jingles and commercials? They use music because they realize that music is a very powerful language for communication. So much so that they're ready to spend a few $1,000s on me to actually create a piece of music. And they're ready to spend a few $1 million to actually air that music on television and radio. Because they understand that music will be able to sell their product better than a talking commercial or something like that. So I've always felt that, that the power of music should always be harnessed for good. But I needed that push. And that meeting with Prime Minister Modi pushed me in the right direction. That, that just jump into it. Because sometimes you feel that, okay, I should transition into this. But then he encouraged me to go into the deep end of the swimming pool, and jump in and figure out your way out, and just stop all forms of commercial music and create music for the better good.
Do you feel fulfilled with that?
Extremely fulfilled. I think best decision I've ever made in my life, because right now my music has got a purpose, my life has got a purpose, and right now my passions are completely connected, because I was an environmentalist and a musician. Now both these things have come together as one.
And I just want to show this to my viewers. This is what I've been presented, and it's the 15th August. It's the Freedom Week that we are going through. So I'm going to wear this with great sense of pride and honor. And thank you so much for being part of the podcast, and wishing you all the success from all of us here at ANI.
No, it's been an absolute honor to be on a podcast. I've been watching it forever, and it's great to be sitting down in front of you and just experience this room that I've been seeing on YouTube for so long.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All the best.
Thank you.
So it's decided then. The world-renowned musician has absolutely decided as to where the origins of the Mysore Pak are, Karnataka. That's all in this episode. Thank you for watching or listening in to ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. Namaste. Jai Hind. Click here to watch the previous episodes.